Jonathan Kuminga wants to come to Sacramento. The Kings are offering him a starting spot, amongst other things. But if Kuminga were to become a King, what does that mean for DeMar DeRozan? Would they look to trade him, ask him to go to the bench? I have some insight on that and more right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News, and this Jonathan Kuminga saga continues. Or, in reality, it kind of just stays the same with little bits of information and insight coming out every day or few days about what the Warriors want or thinking, what the Kings want or are thinking, what Jonathan Kuminga wants or is thinking. And in reality, it's just three different parties kind of staring at each other, waiting for someone to budge. And as we're going to talk about on today's podcast, I don't think the Kings are willing to budge at this point, but should they be? And if they were to budge in order to get a Jonathan Kuminga trade done, sign and trade done, does that impact DeMar DeRozan's role and future with the Sacramento Kings? Plenty to get to on this podcast today. I also want to talk a little bit about Zach LaVine and expectations for Zach going into next season. That's coming up at the end of the show today. But most recent information about Jonathan Kuminga, Mark Spears said on ESPN that Kuminga wants to come to Sacramento. He wants to play for the Kings. That is his ideal destination at this point. Now, we know that the Warriors really only have two offers, concrete offers on the table. One is from the Kings, one is from the Phoenix Suns. And parties have met. Kuminga has met with the Sacramento Kings. I shared with you like a week or two ago that I was told the meeting between the Kings and Kuminga went really, really well. And I think that is made perfectly clear by this report from Mark that Kuminga wants to come here, right? And there's been talk and rumors of dollar figures and how much the Suns would be willing to offer and potentially how much the Sacramento Kings would be willing to offer. It sounds like the Kings offer would be a little bit less than the Phoenix Suns, although the Phoenix Suns trade offer to the Golden State Warriors, I think, is significantly worse than the Sacramento Kings offer. Not that the Kings offer is that great either, but the Suns offer was essentially like Royce O'Neal and 6 second-round picks or something like that because the Suns don't have a first rounder to trade at this point. So those circumstances haven't changed, right? As much as I wish I could come on the Locked On Kings podcast to tell you, oh, there's new information, there's a new development, there's progress that's been made. Again, we find out these little bits and pieces of information or context, but in reality, we're in the same spot that we've been in for weeks. The Warriors really just aren't playing ball. They're not. Like, they don't have to necessarily. There's enough out there that a deal could be done. Like, Jonathan Kuminga arguably should be a Sacramento King by now. It's just waiting on the Golden State Warriors to say, okay, fine, and accept the offer that the Kings have put out there. Now, Mark Spears has also floated out a potential offer from the Sacramento Kings of Malik Monk and a protected first-round pick, which I shared with you weeks ago that Malik was not, or was on the table, but the Warriors did not have interest in Malik, just like the Warriors seemingly don't have interest in the Devin Carter, Dario Saric trade package. So we're just in this state of limbo. The Warriors are being difficult, but if we're being completely honest too, so are the Sacramento Kings. Scott Perry is refusing to budge. Now, I support this from Scott. I think he's doing the right thing. I think he's not giving into what the Warriors are demanding when the Warriors may have the leverage, they may have the final say, but as we've talked about at length over the last month, the Warriors are also in the worst position. They have the biggest mess to clean up that the Sacramento Kings are willing to say, all right, fine, don't take our offer and figure that mess out yourselves. But the Sacramento Kings have to also take ownership of the fact that if they really, really, really wanted Kuminga, if they wanted this deal to be done, they could have gotten it done by now. Because whether it's Keon Ellis or an unprotected first-round pick, the Kings know what the Warriors are asking for. Again, I personally would not include either of those in a deal. You don't have to give an unprotected first-round pick up for Jonathan Kuminga, given the circumstances of what the Warriors do. You certainly don't have to give up Keon Ellis in this deal. And I understand wholeheartedly, and I'm sure there are going to be Warrior fans in the comment section of this podcast saying, well, then fine, you're not getting Kuminga. I get it. Like, I totally understand that perspective from Warriors fans, from the Warriors organization themselves. And like I've said before, I think the Kings are okay with that scenario. But I want to ask this question to you, Kings fans listening. Should they be willing to budge? I'm asking you. Again, I personally feel that the Kings do not have to give in, that the Kings do not have to include Keon, do not have to include a future unprotected first-round pick. I would rather them play the long game, not have Kuminga to start the season and see if anything changes from now to the trade deadline, or if Kuminga signs a qualifying offer and then is just an unrestricted free agent next summer and the Kings can go out and sign him then. I'm totally okay with that route. But are you? Are you in the camp of Kuminga's right there, he's there for the taking, he wants to play for you, you want him, just go out and get him. Just get it done. Include Keon. Include an unprotected first-round pick. If that's you, which one would you rather include, Keon or that unprotected first? Because the Warriors sure as heck aren't getting both. They know that. Are you in that camp? Are you to the point where it's like, you know what? This opportunity does not come around very often. Just go and get it done, and I'd be willing to include one of those two. Tell me which one, and tell me why you feel that way and why you believe that it's worth it to go out and get Kuminga right now, and the value of having Kuminga right now versus waiting a handful of months to a year. And of course, a lot can change in the year too. There's no guarantee. If they don't get this deal done now, there's no guarantee that they'll have an opportunity to get him in the future. And maybe that's your whole point. Maybe it's, Matt, we're the Sacramento Kings. These opportunities don't grow on trees. We've been looking for a wing like Jonathan Kuminga for the last handful of years. He's right there. He's available. I'm willing to include Keon Ellis. I'm willing to use one of my future first-round picks, unprotected, to go and get that deal done. If that's you, great. Tell me why. But there's been a conversation that's been floating around Sacramento of, okay, let's say the Kings go out and get Jonathan Kuminga. What does that mean for DeMar DeRozan? Right, Alan Stiles from Sacktown Sports 1140 was talking about, like, is there a handshake deal in place between the Kings and DeRozan to where if the Kings were to get Kuminga, then the Kings would go to DeRozan and say, okay, we've promised Kuminga a starting spot. Your starting spot is the one that we're more than likely going to give him. I don't see them moving Keegan out. I certainly don't see them moving Zach LaVine out, and they need Dennis Schroeder to start as a point guard. So, DeMar, we're gonna look to move you somewhere else. So, out of respect, you can go and get the role that you want and get another opportunity to compete at a high level instead of asking you to come off the bench. I understand that theory completely. I've inquired about it. I asked about it. I was like, hey, what is the plan with DeRozan if you bring in Kuminga, who, again, the Kings have reportedly promised a starting spot, promised the opportunity here in Sacramento that he never got in Golden State. And I was told pretty directly that the Kings would sooner ask DeMar to come off the bench than they would trade him. Like, all signs point to, and I've talked about this earlier on in the offseason, right around a little bit after Scott Perry was or became the general manager of the Kings. all signs point to the Kings and Perry want DeMar DeRozan here. But why? I'll talk a little bit about why and how DeMar fits with the identity building and the culture building that the Sacramento Kings are trying to establish this season, and how I feel DeMar would handle being asked to come off the bench. I'll talk all about that, plus some conversations about Zach LaVine, his role with the Kings next season. Is he the guy on this roster no matter if Kuminga is here or not? That's all still coming here on Locked On Kings. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. There's so many things that Monarch Money will teach you. It won't just help give you like step-by-step processes of how to save or how to get your savings built up or get a credit card down or whatever the situation that you're going through. In addition to that, it'll break down specifically where your money is going so you don't have the excuse anymore of, I don't know where my money's going, right? Monarch Money will break it all down for you and make it so easy that even the most financially illiterate people like myself can understand it. That's the power of Monarch Money. Plus, it's all in one place, right? You don't have to manage a bunch of different apps and a bunch of different like folders on your computer or anything like that. Monarch Money brings it all together and makes it as simple as possible. And if you have multiple accounts, shared accounts with your partners, separate accounts, Monarch Money manages all of that easily as well. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Those of you who have listened to me consistently since last season and the end of last season and in the beginning of this offseason, first off, thank you so incredibly much. I appreciate you. Second, you'll remember me going into the offseason, and even before the offseason started, even late last season, I was telling you I would be shocked if DeMar DeRozan was the Sacramento King going forward, if DeRozan was still on the Kings next season. To me, it made perfect sense for DeRozan to want to move on. He came here to Sacramento because he thought it was one of his best chances to win. Obviously, last season completely backfired on the Kings organization, and DeMar's only getting older. He only has so many years left in the league, so it would make perfect sense to me for DeMar to want a change of scenery. It also would have made perfect sense to me for the Sacramento Kings to want to move on from DeMar DeRozan at the time because it didn't really work last year. Not that it was completely DeMar's fault. The Kings are more trending towards a direction of resetting, and we've seen what a Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan core looks like in Chicago for many years, so why would we just want to try that, but now the Sacramento version, right? But very quickly, after Scott Perry took over as the general manager of the Kings, it became very clear that the Kings weren't shopping DeMar, that DeMar didn't have a market that the Kings were particularly interested in exploring. I do believe it would have been easier for the Kings to move DeMar DeRozan than it's been to move Malik Monk or Devin Carter, of course. But I really don't think the Sacramento Kings at any point have had interest in moving DeMar. Scott Perry, all signs, and what I've been told, point to Scott Perry wants DeMar DeRozan here. But if you might remember at the very beginning of the offseason, too, I did an exercise where after Scott Perry's press conference, where he laid out his identity traits for the culture he wants to build and how he wants the Sacramento Kings to play and operate going forward, I took all of those traits and I ran through the Kings roster and kind of put up together a grading system and broke down who fit and who didn't. And DeMar and Zach LaVine both didn't have the highest of scores. There's a lot of on-court identity traits that the Sacramento Kings are trying to establish that I do not think DeMar DeRozan fits. especially on the defensive end of the ball. And again, you can insert Zach LaVine into the same exact conversation. But when it comes to the signing of Dennis Schroeder, the interest in Russell Westbrook, and now the desire to keep DeMar DeRozan here, to me, it all points to culture building and leadership. Now, I'm not fully sold on this. I'll be completely honest with you. I'm not fully sold that keeping DeMar DeRozan around is the right thing to do to establish the culture that Perry and Christie are trying to establish. And I don't mean that as an anti-DeMar DeRozan take. If the Kings were to trade DeMar DeRozan, they would get worse. Some people would argue it's fine for the Kings to get worse because it's better to be worse than it is to be mid. I've said similar things over the course of this offseason. I have questions about how keeping DeMar DeRozan here helps the Kings accomplish that establishing culture goal next season, especially when DeMar is very unlikely to be here beyond 2 more years. Again, same thing with Zach LaVine. But I believe Perry views DeMar as the consummate professional that DeMar is, and he absolutely is a professional, right? One of the most well-respected veterans, players, period, around the league. DeMar DeRozan is that. And DeMar said it himself that last year was one of the most chaotic, crazy seasons that he's ever had. It was the most chaotic, crazy season that he's ever been through in his career. And unfortunately, it was his one season here in Sacramento. Some of the chaos that we're used to around here, it was new. It was a wake-up call for DeMar. But I also believe that DeMar recognizes or would listen to Perry and Doug and the vision that they have going forward and take young players like Nick Clifford under his wing to help build and establish what the Kings are trying to establish. Plus, like I laid out for you last week or it might have been earlier this week, in my Scott Perry 2-year plan that I've come up with in my head, DeMar DeRozan does impact winning and would help the Sacramento Kings win. So again, every single time I've inquired about the Kings moving on from DeMar DeRozan, I've been met with some pretty definitive no. The Kings aren't looking to trade him. But they would, if they were to go out and get Jonathan Kuminga, which I still believe is unlikely at this point, they would ask DeRozan to come off the bench. Now, if this were NBA 2K and you were telling me I could have a mercenary scoring option like DeMar come in off the bench, then fantastic. But for context, DeMar DeRozan has played just under 1,200 games in his career. 12 of those 1,082 or 84 games, 12 of them, he hasn't started. He's been a starter basically his entire career, and those 12 games were during his rookie season. For the last 15 years, DeMar DeRozan has been a starter. And over those 15 years, his numbers have been steady and consistent regardless of his age or the team that he was playing for. That's not an easy sell. That's not an easy sell for anyone. Now, again, I think DeMar DeRozan is an absolute pro. And I don't believe DeMar DeRozan would throw a fit or threaten to demand a trade or anything like that if Doug Christie were to come to him and go, look, DeMar, we want you here. You're an important leader for this group, but we're also building towards the future. Jonathan Kuminga, if we were to get him, is part of our future. Will you do this for us? I don't know how DeMar would handle that. I don't think he would throw a fit. I don't think he would pout about it. I just don't know if the Sacramento Kings are the team to ask that of him, even at 36 years old. Like the Sacramento Kings, a team that has made the playoffs once in the last almost 20 years, they're the team to ask or expect a Hall of Famer, a first ballot, surefire Hall of Famer in DeMar DeRozan to come off the bench. optically, I think it looks worse on the Kings to ask him than it would on DeMar to say no. And again, I don't really think DeMar would say no. I'm not going to pretend he'd be happy about it. I say all that to say I genuinely do not know how he would handle it. I just don't know if the Sacramento Kings can make that request or make that demand of DeMar. Again, I don't think they will end up having to make that request or demand of DeMar. I do not think this Jonathan Kuminga thing is going to happen this summer. I do not think the Kings are willing to budge, and I do not think the Golden State Warriors are going to play ball and accept the reality of their situation. They're going to try and play the longer game. It's completely in their prerogative to do that and figure out what to do with that mess, and it might work out great for them. It might work out awful for them. I have no idea. I'm not here to roll my eyes or be sarcastic or make any kind of I'm just not here to drag the Warriors with their handling of this situation. If I put myself in the shoes of the Warriors and even Warriors fans, I understand completely how they feel with this. I don't know why the Sacramento Kings or the Phoenix Suns or any team would have to bow or change how they're operating or how they're approaching this situation because of the Warriors. So I don't think it's happening. If it does happen, the Kings, I'm told, would sooner ask DeMar DeRozan to move to the bench before trading him. I just think that's a really, really tough ask. A really tough ask. And if you're not comfortable, if you're not confident in doing that, and you still want DeMar DeRozan on your team, what is the alternative? Is it moving Keegan Murray out of the starting lineup? Because I don't think you're going to be able to move Zach out of the starting lineup. LaVine. Unless you want to go big and just say, F it, we're still not going to have a point guard and have LaVine and DeRozan play the 1 and 2 and have Kuminga the 3, Keegan the 4. I don't know. I don't know what you do. But I do not believe that DeMar DeRozan will be traded at any point, and we'll reevaluate that when we get closer to the trade deadline. I've had people ask me, and probably a lot of it was sarcastic, Matt, why would Jonathan Kuminga want to come to the Kings? Like, why the Kings? I know he's not happy with the Golden State Warriors. I know things haven't worked out with the Golden State Warriors, but that is a championship caliber organization, arguably one of the best organizations, not just in the NBA, but in professional sports over the last decade. Why the heck would he want to come to the Sacramento Kings that are a roller coaster of an organization and a model of instability at best? Because the Sacramento Kings, I think, are making available everything that Jonathan Kuminga is looking for. Maybe they're not going to pay him every penny that he feels that he is worth. Nobody in the league is going to do that. I think Kuminga and his camp have accepted that to some extent. But Kuminga's issue with the Warriors is that they never gave him the opportunity to be the best version of himself. The Warriors wanted Kuminga to kind of fit into a box and a role that would ultimately help them maximize their team at that time. They needed Kuminga to support their Curry-led title window or title contention window. I understand completely why the Warriors did that. If I'm the Golden State Warriors, I'm doing everything with the priority in my mind is how do I open one more championship window opportunity for Steph Curry in his career here in Golden State. That should be their number one priority, their number one prerogative, and if them handling Kuminga in that way makes complete sense to me. Doesn't mean they didn't make mistakes along the way. And I also understand Kuminga's frustration as a former top pick and someone with all this tremendous offensive upside being asked, hey, we don't really need that scoring from you. You're not going to get that opportunity, but we need you to defend. We need you to rebound and just be ready for some offensive opportunity when they come. Now, Kuminga looks at Sacramento as getting these promises from Sacramento of a everyday starting role, of a green light, and going, yeah, I can go to Sacramento and I can be the dude. I can be the guy there. I can develop into the core, the center of the future of that organization. But again, If Kuminga were to be traded to the Sacramento Kings, sign and trade, LaVine is still here. DeRozan is still here. Sabonis is still here. Where does Kuminga fall in that totem pole? I think you have to put him ahead of DeMar DeRozan to some extent because, in theory, Kuminga is taking DeMar's starting spot, or at least that's what the Kings would ask of DeRozan. But what about Zach LaVine? Regardless of if Jonathan Kuminga is on this team or not, is Zach LaVine the guy here in Sacramento next season? For years, this was De'Aaron Fox's team. And even during that time, you could argue Domantas Sabonis got more accolades and had better overall numbers with his double-doubles and triple-doubles, but it was never really questioned if it was Domantas Sabonis' team or De'Aaron Fox's team. De'Aaron was always looked at as the guy here. Well, he gone. I still don't think it's Domantas Sabonis' team because as good as Domas is, how can it be Sabonis' team when Sabonis' first instinct is not to score the basketball? This is an offensive league. No matter how important defense is and how much the Kings want to establish a defensive identity, this league is built on offense. And Zach LaVine is coming off of a monster offensive season. A monster year. He averaged 23 points per game, shot 51% from the field, 44% from three-point range, 82% from the foul line, averaged 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and maybe most importantly out of all of that, he played in 74 games last season after all the injury history that he's had. I don't know, the easiest argument to make is that Zach LaVine is the dude on this Kings roster next year. Now, we could easily discuss if that's a good thing or not, and I think that's a fair discussion. We know that anybody who has doubts in Zach LaVine's ability to be a winning basketball player is justified because I think the general manager of the Sacramento Kings, Scott Perry, has those same doubts. And the Kings are going to ask for more defense from Zach LaVine. But LaVine is an offensive player. LaVine is a scorer. LaVine is a bucket. If you are not getting scoring and offense from LaVine at a star level, it is not worth the money that you are paying him. You are not maximizing Zach LaVine at all. There is no way in my mind, whether Jonathan Kuminga is here or not, that I can imagine anybody but Zach LaVine being the number one offensive option for the Kings next year. Again, that might not be a good thing short term, but that's the reality of the situation because of what the Sacramento Kings traded for last trade deadline. Like, this is LaVine's team offensively, in my opinion. And think back, when were we most frustrated with Zach LaVine last year? Not the Kings for trading for Zach, but Zach specifically. In the limited time that he played here in Sacramento, at what times were we most frustrated with Zach? It was when he was being passive. It was when he was not shooting the basketball. We also saw in that brief time that he was here a number of occasions where he got hot and he was cooking and he couldn't miss. Right? He had a couple of fourth quarters in Sacramento where he just went supernova. Like, that's who Zach LaVine is. That's who the Sacramento Kings acquired. And whether he's going to be on this team for 2 seasons or 1 season or half a season, as long as he is a King, that is his role. That is his responsibility. And in my mind, that makes him the top dog on this team next year. Is he the top dog on a team that barely scrapes their way into the playoffs? Probably. Or misses the playoffs because they're a play-in team again. I have doubts about whether Zach LaVine can be the top dog on a team that's actually a threat in the postseason. And those doubts have carried throughout the vast majority of his career. But if you want to try and make an argument for any other guy being the top guy in Sacramento right now ahead of Zach LaVine, please tell me who. And if you think that Jonathan Kuminga would come here and become the top guy over Zach LaVine, explain that to me, because I don't see how that happens. We covered a lot. The Kings and Jonathan Kuminga want to work together going forward. The Warriors aren't willing to play ball. If the Kings were to get Kuminga, DeMar DeRozan likely not going anywhere. What do you think? Hit me up at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate you continuing these discussions with me as this offseason rolls on. We're still monitoring this Kuminga situation. Every time I check in, nothing really has changed. And more often than not, I'm getting the same kind of response of more than likely it's not going to happen. But things can change quickly. Maybe the Sacramento Kings budge first. Should the Kings budge first? Maybe the Warriors finally give in. I don't think that's happening either. But no matter what happens, we'll follow it all right here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.